everybody, it's Eric Pappenfuss. It's Friday, so it must be a buy day. And today, Olivia, we're going to talk about collecting Agatha Christie. Why Agatha Christie? Well, because Jeff brought us an amazing Agatha Christie book, which is in the box, and we'll get to it in a minute, but also because Agatha Christie is the best-selling fiction author of all time. So it's about time we did a buy day devoted to collecting her work, don't you think? Yeah. All right, we're going to start with 2 trivia questions, Olivia. Let's see how you do. Now, Agatha Christie, quite famously, has sold over 2 billion books. Can you believe that? Billion with a B, which makes her the best-selling fiction author of all time. There is only one other fiction author which has sold anything remarkably close to the total number of books that Agatha Christie has sold. Do you know who that author may be? Also sold in the billions of books. Think most famous English writer in the history of the world. It is William Shakespeare. So Shakespeare and Christie are in a class of their own. And to tell you just how big that is, relatively speaking, Agatha Christie has sold more books than Stephen King, J.K. Rowling, and like Rick Riordan or whoever else you want to do all combined. Billions of books. Now, it helps when you write over 60 novels, but also her books were just all bestsellers, and they've been translated into 100 languages, and Agatha Christie is really amazing. Incidentally, no one of her books has sold tremendously well. And I think her most best-selling individual book that she wrote was And Then There Were None, and that sold over 100 million copies. But the best-selling individual novel of all time, do you know what that is, Olivia? There's your second trivia question. It has sold about 400 million copies. So not a billion, but 400 million for one book. Can you think of the most famous and best-selling book of all time?
To Kill a Mockingbird?
That's a good guess, but no, it's Don Quixote. It is, believe it or not, Don Quixote. So, but Cervantes didn't write 60 novels, so, you know, that's it. And you don't get the cumulative effect of book after book after book. All right. When we're talking about collecting Agatha Christie, for our purposes today, we're going to talk about collecting American first editions. Now, her publisher in England was Collins of HarperCollins fame, and that's why HarperCollins today has the worldwide publishing rights for paperback for all those Agatha Christie novels. And recently, HarperCollins discovered in their archives some letters that Agatha Christie had written in which she expressed, great opinions about her dust jackets, the designs of her books, the sales of her books. She was very actively engaged. And she certainly favored an American publisher, and that publisher was Dodd Mead. Now, Dodd Mead was a famous New York publisher at the time that Christie selected them back in the 20s. And when you're talking about first editions, first American editions for Agatha Christie books, they're all published by Dodd Mead. Now, before we get to the box, I've got some general examples in front of me. Now, these are books from the 50s, 60s, and 70s that are Agatha Christie first editions. And as you can see from the spines, they are indeed all published by Dodd Mead. And when you go back to her earlier works from the 20s and 30s, you get a book like this, 13 at Dinner, which was published by Dodd Mead in 1933. Now, a couple quick things. In the early days of Agatha Christie, there was a reprint publisher called Grossop and Dunlop. And Grossop basically would republish these Dodd Mead books in new jackets. They would look all very similar, but instead of saying Dodd Mead on the spine, they would say Grossop and Dunlop on the spine. So unless your book says Dodd Mead on the spine, it is probably a reprint and not a first edition Agatha Christie. Later, when you get into the 50s, 60s, and 70s, they started having book club editions, Olivia, and they would keep the Dodd Mead on the spine, so that's not always a giveaway as to whether or not it's a first edition, but they would use cheaper paper, much like the early reprint publishers, and they would do some things that were a little bit different. There's generally 3 clues to look for in a Dodd Mead edition of later Agatha Christie to tell if it's a first edition. One is it really should have the price on the dust jacket. If it doesn't have the price on the dust jacket, then you've probably got a book club edition. Another is it should not say anything on the jacket about a book club. It shouldn't say book of the month selection. It shouldn't say anything like that. And then the third thing is that it should probably advertise her other books. So if you look here in this edition, you'll see that it also advertised. Now, Dodd Mead was interested in selling the backlist, The book club wasn't. So the book clubs don't always sell the backlist, which is pretty interesting. Now, modern first editions of Agatha Christie's, like the ones from the 1970s, probably only worth, $20. When you get back into the 60s, they can be worth $50. When you get back into the 50s, they can be worth $100 or more. And when you get back in the 30s, when you're really at the golden age of Agatha Christie, before World War II, the books are worth hundreds of dollars if you can find them in pretty good condition. And one more thing about collecting Agatha Christie, which is that you want, if you can find it, the dust jacket. Now, dust jackets from the 1930s are notorious for, especially for Agatha Christie books, for falling apart and being thrown away. So oftentimes when you find a book at a sale, you're probably just going to find the book without the dust jacket. If you can find the dust jacket, it's going to add a value of at least times 10 to the book. So a book that's worth a couple $100, Olivia, without a dust jacket, it's going to be worth a couple $1,000 with the dust jacket. And if you find a torn dust jacket like this, well, that's better than no dust jacket. By the way, come look at how they were advertising Agatha Christie with her dog here in the 1930s. They were actually advertising her as an American by birth. I don't know if the British would appreciate that, but nonetheless, Mead is sort of pitching her as an American by birth, which I found pretty interesting. All right, are you ready to get to the box? Now, inside the box, I have 4 Agatha Christie first American editions published by Mead, each of which we will talk about somewhat briefly, and they're all from the golden age of the 1930s. And I'll take the first 3 out in chronological order, and you can just get a sense of the various colors and the look of the Mead books. And you can see that since they were produced with really quality paper, Olivia, they've held up pretty well. Now, these are books that were read, and the dust jackets are gone on them for the most part, but they've held up well. This book here, Murder at Hazelmoor, is a very interesting selection because it was published in 1931, and this is the first book that Agatha Christie wrote in which they changed the title from the British version to the American version. Would you like to guess what word they added in the American version? Well, they added the word murder, Olivia. So it did not have murder in the title when it was published in England, but they thought that would help sell the book. Probably a pretty good and wise choice. What's interesting about this book is was published, as I showed you, in 1931. A few years before, in 1926, Agatha Christie had very famously disappeared for over a week. And there was a national search for her. It's been immortalized in everything from episodes of Doctor Who to other novels and history books that have tried to find Agatha Christie, the sort of missing time. But she had just been informed by her husband that he was divorcing her. And she suffered something of an emotional, just a really negative response to that. It was famous, though, at the time because Arthur Conan Doyle was still alive. And do you know what he did to try and find Agatha Christie? This is very Doyle. And if you watch By Day, you're going to know the answer. He organized a seance. And Doyle was at that time into spiritualism. And unfortunately, the seance did not reveal the location of Agatha Christie, but at least Agatha Christie was not dead. And then this book famously is sort of a play on Doyle. It takes place on the moors. It references Doyle. If you come here to page 109, Olivia, it's just sort of funny. And they talk, that seance business was queer too, he added. I'm thinking of writing that up for the paper. Get opinions for Sir Oliver Lodge and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and a few actresses and people about it. She's making fun of Arthur Conan Doyle and the seances. The second book that we have here is interesting because this is Mr. Parker Pyne, Detective by Agatha Christie. And it's interesting because, while this is an Hercule Poirot mystery, this is one of her lesser-known characters, not as famous as Miss Marple or Poirot. It is Parker Pyne. And Parker Pyne is famous, Olivia, because, look, he advertised in the newspaper, sort of a la Sherlock Holmes, in the personal pages. And he would put a note out that said, "Are you happy? If not, consult Mr. Parker Pyne." And he would get all sorts of queries. This book is basically a collection of stories about Parker Pyne and his cases, a little bit also like Sherlock Holmes. And it is famous as well because it has a story called Death on the Nile, which has nothing to do with her later book, Death on the Nile, which we'll get to in just a minute. The third book that we have here is Murder in Mesopotamia. I chose this first edition, and you just get a sense of the variety of colors and designs. But this one is great because her second husband, whom she marries, is an archaeologist, and they basically they meet on a dig in Mesopotamia. And this book is basically an autobiographical story about her love of archaeology when she met her first husband. And it is this book, which is cited in the great book, the most important book that we have, the best one of all. Why? Because it has its dust jacket. It is Death on the Nile. And that's the book Jeff brought us. I know that you're thinking right now, boy, every bookstore needs a Jeff to bring amazing books. But here it is. Come a little closer because you can see this is the original dust jacket design for Death on the Nile. Now you can see how much the books cost back in the 30s. $2 was a lot in the 1930s. This is the equivalent of like a $50 hardcover book today. So it wasn't the cheap end of book publishing. You can see that she's no longer with her dog on the cover, but you can see that it's got a really nice design, and this is a classic. Now there's a famous quote in Death on the Nile that compares archaeology with being a mystery detective, and I'll read you that quote because I think it's pretty good. When he's gathered everybody together on the boat and he's explaining who did the murder, Poirot says, "Once I went professionally to an archaeological exhibition and I learned something there. In the course of an excavation, when something comes up out of the ground, everything is cleared away very carefully all around it. You take away the loose earth and you scrape here and there with a knife until finally your object is there, all alone, ready to be drawn and photographed with no extraneous matter confusing it. This is what I've been seeking to do, clear away the extraneous matter so that we can see the truth," right? So that is a reference to Murder in Mesopotamia that exists in Death on the Nile. Well, those are Agatha Christie books. I hope you enjoyed those. You can still find these Don Mead American First editions today if you look hard enough at library sales, and now you know, hopefully, how to identify an American First. We're going to end with a funny book. This one is funny in the spirit of Agatha Christie. It is Make My Day, Haydock's Best Revenge Techniques for the Punks in Your Life. And this, believe it or not, Olivia, is a book on how to take revenge on people. And it's published by a very famous press. Let me get you the title page. Haydock is just a sort of nom de plume, but Paladin Press. And it's interesting because Paladin Press eventually goes out of business for publishing books like this, in addition to revenge techniques, which includes some very questionable revenge techniques, like how to create a portable grenade launcher. And there's a warning label on the front that says many of these techniques may be illegal. They also publish a guide to how to be a hitman. Now, this is a novel, and it's not supposed to be taken seriously, but they get sued and put out of business. Paladin Press. Now, I can tell you that Agatha Christie would not have approved her favorite revenge technique. Do you know what it was? Poison. Poison. Just like the poison you see on the cover of 13 at dinner. If you come in, poison. And she learned about poisons by volunteering during both World Wars, World War I and World War II. And she had the latest techniques on how to seek revenge, and she put them in all of her novels. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Buy Day Friday, and I hope you'll watch next Friday and every Friday at noon for more adventures in the world of books.